Today we're making fried rice and focusing on knife skills. We're going to start by making the rice because it needs to be made a day ahead of time so that it can dry out. So wash the rice until the water runs clear, and I use a sifter to drain the rice so I don't lose any grains. So continue to wash and drain until the water runs clear. You'll need to rinse the rice 4 to 5 times until all of the starch is removed from the grains. When you're finished, you're going to add the same amount of water that you did rice. For instance, if you use 2 cups of rice, you're going to add 2 cups of water. So it's an equal part ratio. Put it in the rice cooker, push the button, put the lid on it, and you're done. You can also make rice in a pot over the stove if you don't have a rice cooker. So you follow the same directions as you did for the rice cooker by washing the rice, adding the same amount of water, but what we're going to do differently is we're going to bring the rice to a boil. Once it reaches a boil, you're going to put a lid on it, turn it down to low, and leave it there for 20 minutes. You don't want to open the lid at any point during cooking because that water that you're going to let evaporate and escape when you open the lid may cause your rice not to cook enough. So it's important that during that 20 minutes you just leave the lid on and leave it alone. So once your rice is finished cooking, for fried rice we're going to line a sheet tray with plastic wrap, and you're going to spread the rice out over this tray. Now having rice dry out in the refrigerator overnight is going to let the grains separate so that they're not all stuck together when you fry the rice. And drying it out just gives the fried rice a better texture. Once the rice is spread out, cover it and refrigerate it. So now we're going to start working on our knife cuts. Put a non-skid mat down and then put your board over it. And I'm going to start by showing you how to cut garlic. Trim the end off. It's woody. We don't want to eat that, so get rid of it. Put your knife over it and give it a good squish. You shouldn't have to crush it with your hand more than once. Just make sure you give it one good whack. Mince it up. Be real careful when you're moving your finger across the blade. And now what I'm doing is crushing it even further with my blade, and that's about it. The next step is to cut our green onion. We're going to use it as a garnish on our fried rice. Now I'm going to save that bottom 2 inches that's attached to the root so I can plant it in my garden and have more in a few weeks. And I'm going to focus on the greens right now because I want to make curly green onion garnishes. So what I'm doing is I'm running my knife just through one side to open it up. I'm not cutting all the way through. And then I'm going to make long diagonal cuts through the onion, which are going to end up looking kind of like V shapes. And then those V shapes, because they're cut, they're not connected anymore, they're going to curl up when I put them in ice water. Okay, so I'll show you one more time. Just cut straight along it. Don't cut all the way through. You can even open it up and cut it if you prefer. And then make long V cuts. You might have to do it to know what I mean, but you'll get the hang of it. It's not that hard. Okay, see the V shapes? Those long tendrils will curl up in the ice water. Now a more common cut for green onion would just be the straight up circle. Very simple. So I cut my green onions about 3 inches long and I line them all up together and then I slice them as thin as I can. Now making them thin is going to help add a subtle flavor because you don't want it to bite into a big chunk of green onion. Okay. Now see that white piece over onto the side? It's more fibrous. I don't really want to use it as a garnish. It's stronger flavored. It's kind of woody because of the fibers. So I'm going to slice it up, save it for a stir fry or use it in a stock, and that's the best way to use that. So the next item we are going to cut is an onion. Onions have a top and a bottom, so you need to cut through the top down to the root, and the root end has the little hairs on it. It also has that yellow core that you can see. And you want to leave the root on while you cut off the top. And the top is where the greens will grow out from the ground to absorb sun in order to grow. So when you cut off the top, it's much easier to peel now. So now that it's peeled, I'm going to put my knife parallel to the cutting board, and I'm going to make like planks of wood, these horizontal cuts that are going to make my dice more uniform. Now you need to have the heel of your palm on the highest part of the onion with your fingers pointed up to avoid cutting them, and you can see all of the 1/4 inch cuts that I've made. Now I'm going to make my julienne. Now notice that I'm not cutting all the way through the onion, I'm leaving it intact in the back because I want that root to stay attached. That's how everything is staying together here and not falling all over the place. If you do have a few pieces that fall off on the front, don't worry about them. Push them off to the side and you can cut those up more later. So now is the dicing. Notice I'm using the claw with my fingers turned under so that I don't cut myself. Continue all the way down to the bottom of the onion near the root. Now the majority of my onion's cut, but I still have all of that onion that's attached to the root area, so I'm going to slice it up, making sure not to include any of that core, because the core is fibrous and kind of woody. So you can see it there. That I'm going to discard, that's garbage. And the rest of this I'm just going to cut up to make the same size as the rest of my dice. Now I'm going to peel my ginger, and I'm just going to go ahead and slice off the sides so that I get like a log of ginger, and I don't want to deal with those tiny little pieces. If you want to deal with those tiny little pieces, you can. Now this object that I'm using is called a microplane, and it's great for zesting, and it's also great for grating things very finely. So I'm going to set my ginger aside and move on to my carrot, which needs to be peeled. These carrots are really small, so if you can find a larger one to work with, it will certainly be easier. Now it's time to trim. Don't trim too much. You only need to take off maybe a 1/4 inch or less of the stem because it might taste a little bit green or be a little bit ugly. So once that's trimmed up, we're going to cut our carrots into manageable lengths because you don't want to try to slice the entire length of the carrot. It can be kind of dangerous. So I'm going to slice the planks just like we did with the onion, make the long cuts, and then I'm going to julienne them. Now julienne is a matchstick, so I have to get a matchstick before I can make a dice. So once those are complete, I will line them all up and then go ahead and complete my dice. And the dice I'm making today is a Brunoise, which is 1/8 by 1/8 by 1/8. Brunoise is the smallest dice, so I'm going to start by lining everything up so that I begin with even cuts, and go ahead and start making those cuts 1/8 inch wide until you're finished. As soon as I'm done with this, I'm going to start cutting meat. But in class, since you have more people to help cut, have one board for veggies and one for meat so that you don't cross-contaminate. So I'm starting with the bacon, and I'm going to cut lardons, which are thinly sliced pieces of bacon or any sort of fatty pork product that you want to render down and get all the fat out of. So I'm going to slice these really thin and then cook them up so that they're like bacon bits. If you have a hard time cutting bacon, it might be because it's too warm, so try freezing it first and then cutting it. Now moving on to the Portuguese sausage, cut off one side, and now put that side down on your board so that it sits flat and doesn't move around. Go ahead and cut the planks, and then those planks are going to be cut into julienne, and then we'll dice it. You need to make sure that everything is cut really small, either 1/8 of an inch or 1/4 of an inch, and that's going to ensure that you have yummy pieces of meat throughout your fried rice and not just some big pieces. While you're cutting today, I hope you're practicing the claw. Keep your fingers turned under so that you don't chop your fingertips. And also hold the knife correctly. Make sure you have finger and thumb holding the blade with the other 3 fingers wrapped around the handle. So now that all of our mise en place is ready to go, we are going to start making the sauce. Start with garlic, and then the 1/8 of a teaspoon of ginger. In order to make an 1/8 of a teaspoon, you just fill up the 1/4 teaspoon halfway. The soy sauce goes in, followed by oyster sauce and some ketchup, which is more sugar than tomato really, sesame oil, some fish sauce, which is going to add salt, and some sambal for a little spice, and a little bit of black pepper, and stir it up. And we're going to prepare our eggs next. If you want to crack an egg with one hand, it's really easy. The pointy side up by your index finger, and then use your thumb to separate the shells. Okay, so we're going to start by rendering the bacon. You're going to want to get all the fat out until it's golden brown, and then have a bowl with a strainer over it to drain all the fat from it. Next, we're going to do the Portuguese sausage and the Spam, or ham if you prefer. Cook that until it's nice and golden brown, and then you're going to add it to the bacon to drain off any of the fat that might be there. Then we're going to take that fat, put it into the saute pan, and cook our onion in it. This is going to save us a little bit of money since we didn't have to use oil, and it's also going to make our onion taste delicious. Cook your onion until it's translucent. You want to make sure it's cooked through so that you don't have crunchy bits of onion in your fried rice. And notice how we're cooking everything pretty much separately. We do that because everything cooks at a different rate. If we were to cook the onions with the bacon wouldn't be able to properly render. So that's why we do that. While the onions are cooking, go ahead and get the rice mixed with all of the meat. Break all the rice up into small pieces and make sure the meat is evenly distributed. Now the onions are looking pretty much done, so it's time to add our carrots, which are going to cook really fast. Make sure you taste your carrots and make sure they're cooked through before you add them to the rice. Once they're done, go ahead and stir them in. Add your green onion. You can have some green onion that's cut thinly like this, and you can have some to save for garnish that are the curly kind. We're going to go ahead and add in all of the sauce. If you're afraid that you might not like the sauce, then add a little bit to start with, taste it. If you want more, go ahead and add more. And if you're not satisfied with the sauce and don't feel like it's enough, then play around with it. Add some more shoyu or oyster sauce. Now, I don't care for large bits of eggs, but if you do, you can scramble your eggs separately. That's fine. I prefer to mix my egg into the rice, kind of like a Chinese style fried rice. So that's up to you. You can play with it and be creative. Now when you add it to your pan, make sure the pan is smoking hot. Put a little bit of oil in it so that it crisps the rice and also doesn't get stuck to the pan. Go ahead and add the rice. You're not going to add it all at once. Do 1/3 or half of the rice at a time, because if you put too much in the pan will get very cold and it'll take a very long time for it to cook. Plus, it's not going to cook it very evenly. You're going to have to be there stirring for a long time. So in the end, really doing half of it at a time will probably end up saving you time. Once the rice is in the pan, level it out and leave it alone. If you stand there and stir it, it will not crisp. You need to leave it for probably 3 to 5 minutes in order for it to get a little bit of crispness to it. And then you can go ahead and stir it up, and then again leave it alone so that it can crisp the other side. Okay, once it's hot and crisp, go ahead and serve it onto a plate or in a bowl. Garnish it with your green onion, and that's it. Enjoy!